Marvel's Eternals is the latest installment from Marvel Studios, and if we're counting TV shows, that makes this the 30th installment into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, what sets this movie aside is that Eternals promised to be something different, bringing something new to this slate of Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Now at this point, every Marvel movie and its subsequent spin-off have been labelled a game changer at some point or other, but there was this really interesting energy in the run-up to Eternals being released, and that's probably fair given that it's being directed by Academy Award winner Chloe Zhao. I am so sorry if I didn't pronounce that name right, but she actually won Best Picture at the latest Oscars for her film Nomadland. Now, a lot has been said about this film in the run-up to its release, and as to be expected with it being a Marvel movie, game changer is one of the things. To be like 100% transparent here, aside from a tiny bit of research that I'd done before Eternals being released, I didn't know a whole lot about the characters, so I went into this with a blank slate. The danger with that, however, is that all I had to go off of in the run-up to this movie coming out was the nothing but this is going to be a masterpiece, this is going to be a masterpiece that I was seeing every day online. And then Rotten Tomatoes happened. Now, I'm not going to get into that. Luckily for you, I have a perfectly handy video on my channel already discussing why I think that Rotten Tomatoes and critics alike are the last place you should be going when trying to make up your own opinion on movies. But today I'm not here to talk to you about why I think that Rotten Tomatoes is the worst way to gauge a movie opinion. Since this video comes out, I have seen Eternals twice now. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that the film that I have now seen twice in cinemas is not the movie that I was expecting. So that being said, hi, my name's Jordan and welcome to the channel. Now let's sit back and talk about why I found this game-changing Marvel movie to be underwhelming. First of all, I'd like to go over a couple of points that I've got here that don't really fit into another topic that I have planned out for the video. They're really just smaller things that I want to address before we can continue. First off, I don't think Eternals is lost on me completely yet. I want to clarify that while I didn't think Eternals was a good movie, I certainly didn't think it was a bad one. It feels like there's almost something there. I also can't really sit here and tell you whether this does or whether this doesn't feel like a Chloe Zhao movie because I haven't watched Nomadland. I have no interest in watching it either because it just really isn't something that fits what I like watching. So if that's the sort of opinion you wanted from me, I'm sorry to say you're not going to get that. But the movie feels ambitious. It feels like there is a bigger movie there somewhere. But it's weighed down by this bloated character roster and the unfortunate reality that this has to tie in with a bigger universe at hand. This movie is trying really hard to be taken seriously. It's trying to feel grand and important, but the unfortunate thing is, this is a Marvel film. They need their jokes. Now I heard that this was going to be a lot lighter on comedy, and it definitely is. It lacks humour, but in a very good way. But obviously where it cuts out a lot of the fat, the meat is still left, and while this cuts out a lot of comedy, this has some of the worst comedic placement I've seen in any MCU film. The jokes that they throw in are just so poorly written and they almost never match the tone of the scene. This film has the most jarring tone possible, and that is shocking considering it's going up against Endgame for that title. Like it's trying to take itself seriously, but it's just being held back. I think that's where the issue of this being a Marvel film actually really comes to light. I think the best way to summarise it would probably be by saying that there is a scene in the third act where a character gives a really emotionally driven speech and it's so well written, and then they're knocked out and it's replaced with a "so that just happened" type moment. Like it doesn't feel like it's taking itself fully seriously, and I think that really holds it back. The CGI, I mean, it's pretty solid. I'd say it looks great most of the time, but I would be lying if I said that it didn't look pretty generic and just unappealing. I'll also get into the characters a little later, but I just want to say that across the board, acting is another solid about this film. It's probably the one main constant throughout that never really dips. However, that is something that we do have with most Marvel movies nowadays, and so for me to use that as praise when basically the bar for most MCU movies at this point, I'm not really sure if I can count that. Doesn't exactly scream game changer. The story is fine. I guess a little undercooked. It's not the worst plotline in the MCU, but it definitely is one of the weaker ones. It just feels so silly and fantastical, yet it never remotely portrays itself like that visually. It tries to be something different, something that sets itself aside from the MCU, but in doing that it ends up sacrificing something important. And as a result, it just ends up becoming this convoluted expository mess. Nearly everything that happens in this movie doesn't actually happen, it's just told to the audience. The whole crux of the dynamic between Cersei and Icarus is that Icarus left her one day and never came back, and rather than show us this scene to properly connect us to it and help us empathise more, it's just talked about, like, oh, remember when you left me? And then 5 minutes later it's, oh, well, it's like that time where you left me. We need to see stuff like that in order to empathise, and I'm a big fan of empathy in film. I just think that there's a lot of this film that isn't shown that should be. It feels like there's a whole other half a movie missing. I also don't know why this film decides to spend most of its time telling a sort of getting the band back together story. That feels really weird as well. These characters, with the powers that they have potential for so much more. But in honesty, that might actually be the real failure with this film. We are watching Eternals, a film spanning millennia, and yet there's absolutely no life or longevity whatsoever to this film. We only hear them talk about these amazing lives that they've lived. We see 3 to 4 mediocre flashbacks that never really explain a whole bunch apart from the bare minimum. It never once feels like a real world, this just feels like fantasy. Like these people have just arrived on Earth yesterday and they're just making up these stories about these amazing things that they've done. I don't know, man, I just think for the characters that they had in this film, I think the story could have offered so much more. I think in general, it's really, for an origin story, it's definitely one of the weaker ones in the MCU. And I think that's because they tried to be too ambitious with it. I genuinely feel like if they had tried to just limit their scope a little bit, this probably could have been a better film. You know, cut out a couple of characters, maybe leave them for a sequel. Because the way that they pushed this film with being as big as they wanted it to be, it's gonna harm it in the long run. Because if this is the way that this first film's turned out, I don't know if a sequel's gonna hold up, like, any better. Eternals boasts what's probably one of the biggest main character rosters for a Marvel movie so far. And I'm not gonna count the Avengers movies, because they all consist of, you know, pre-existing, already introduced characters within the universe. Eternals is an origin story that features 10 main characters, as well as sides and villains, so I would definitely say that it's gunning for the biggest intro movie. Eternals has such a large character roster that it was always going to be impossible for them to flesh every character out. So what I felt like I could do with this segment, to make it go by a bit quicker, to cut the runtime down on this video a little bit, is do a little speed round where I go through the side characters, the villains and the main characters and give my brief thoughts on each one of them, to basically let you know what I thought. So let's do that. The Eternals character speedrun. 3, 2, 1. Deviants are a waste of time in this movie. The Deviants in Marvel Comics are this distinct race with their own ideologies and goals. In Eternals, they're nothing more than CGI generic looking monsters. They've got no real purpose apart from feeding on intelligent life, and filling out the occasional action sequence that the film needs in order to be a Marvel film. Deviants as a threat could have worked, but in the way they're done here, they really just didn't. Thumbs down. Can I say much about the Celestials at all? They're such a towering presence, and yet we barely see any of Arishem. When we do, it's brief, and in that regard, it's fine. It actually does work kinda well, admittedly. But there's no escape, there's definitely a lot missing and a lot more that they could have done with these guys. Thumbs down. Actually a really surprising one. Not prevalent in the movie, he's in like the first 15 and the final 10 minutes of the film. His role in this movie is very much a, look, this character exists and he's going to be prevalent further on down the line. But as an introduction to the character of Dane, I think it's pretty well done. Thumbs up. It's comic relief, there's really not a whole lot else to say. I didn't hate it, but there wasn't necessarily a whole lot that I found funny. I did enjoy the multiple camera gag though, so he can have that. Thumbs. This one was one of the better characters in the film. I thought he brought a necessary energy to the group, but it annoys me how underutilised he was. Like, he's one of the better characters in the roster, and yet he's one of the people sacrificed for the third act. He just sort of disappears, and that sucks because I really did like Kingo. Thumbs up. Here's to hoping the ending that Sprite got in the film is a nod to the fact that she isn't coming back. Because I didn't really like the character. She started off as a quippy, annoying child, and then just started annoying the fuck out of me. Thumbs down. I don't know, man, there is a lot that I like about Cersei, but then there's an equal amount that I'm not too sure on. I was very back and forth a lot of the time watching it, and more often than not, the character just felt kind of flat. However, there were glimpses and moments in the film where she did come to life, and in those moments she really did sell the performances and the emotion that I want in a character. And I feel that solely off those moments, she's going to be a character that I'm going to end up enjoying in the future. So for that, I give a thumbs up. Very much a miss. I'm offended that yet again the Scottish person is the twist piece of shit, and I am in no way looking at that when giving this one my review. Definitely not. Thumbs down. A surprising one. I didn't think much of Gilgamesh in the trailers being released in the run-up to this film, and I think that's why I really liked him in this. Again, the humour was pretty much on point most of the time for the character, which is a pleasant surprise in Marvel movies. The character dynamic with Thena was also something really special and really helped me connect with the character more. Thumbs up. Ajak is good with what we see of her, it's just that we don't see very much. She's the first one dead in the movie, and obviously everything after that is just flashbacks. Hasn't done much for me, but I'm not going to blame that on poor writing, rather the fact that she's just not in it a whole lot. Hesitant thumbs down. Druig, my man. Druig has come out of this weekend as probably the fan favourite character from this film, or at least one of them. And to be honest, I can see why. His inner conflict throughout the film felt very human and real. He really voices a lot of the concerns that these heroes with these powers should have. He's not really my personal favourite from the film, but I do like the character a lot and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of him. Thumbs up! Makari is my favourite character. Hands down. I think from a writing point of view, she was fantastic. She had the most visually interesting power, as well as probably the greatest looking fight in the film when she's going at it with Icarus. I just all around really liked the character. She also had a bit of a thing with Druig, and I want to see that developed further. Overall, I'm just very pleased that one of these characters reached the expectations that I had for them, and for that, they get a double thumbs up. Phastos was fun. We didn't really get a whole lot of him, but he's another one of these characters that's a really well written internal conflict. And obviously this character is a big deal in the fact as well that it's the first openly LGBT main character in a Marvel movie. And I guess I was worried when it came out that this character was LGBT, that he was going to be sort of brushed aside, because we've seen in the past how cagey Disney can be with this sort of stuff. But I am pleased to say that that is not the case, and that's kind of fucking awesome. Thumbs up. Thena probably has the biggest emotional character drive in this movie. Her arc is pretty much going through this very harsh and brutal problem that she is dealing with. I definitely say that she's one of the more interesting characters from the bunch. She was also in the film a lot more than I thought she was going to be. I didn't know if Marvel Studios would be able to afford Angelina Jolie. But she gets a thumbs up, and that rounds out our characters. Real quick, I just wanted to talk about the online reception to this movie, and more the online reception to people giving their online reception to this movie. It is rough at this point when it comes to Marvel films, especially on the internet. On one hand, you have these people determined to break down and tell you that it's the worst thing to ever be released in a cinema. But then you have the other coin, these people with the Bucky or the Sam or the Wanda profile pictures, telling you that you're racist or you're misogynistic for not liking a film. I mean, I've seen people be hollered at for this one already, and I just think we need to knock it back a few pegs. I don't know where this toxic mentality came from. A large part of it has probably been created by the echo chamber that is Stan Twitter, but I really don't like the fact that there are people that are going to see this review and decide that the takeaway point from it is, well, Eternals wasn't made for him, so who the fuck cares what he thinks? Because in actual fact, it's not made for you either. It's made for the director. It's made for film consumers. If we were to put this into perspective for a second, say you group my review of Captain Marvel with another 99, but say mine's is the only positive one. Because I'm not a white female who this movie was supposedly made for, does that then mean that mine's is invalid and the rest of the negative reviews are the ones that you should be listening to? I just think it's a really stupid thing that, like, children on the internet don't think a whole lot about before deciding to spout off about on Twitter. Now, are there people out there that are review bombing this? Are there people out there being complete pieces of shit? Yes, there is. I'm not going to bother trying to hide away and saying that there's not, because that would be pointless of me. But is that an excuse for children to go around on the internet quote tweeting every negative opinion about a film, assuming this person means the worst, when the harsh reality is that the movie just isn't as good as you want it to be? Everyone's in your little echo chamber. It's time to come out and look at the other things that we call other opinions. As much as I wanted it to not be, Eternals is a movie that is very much stuck in this situation. But if you like Eternals, hey, good for you, that's fucking great. What, do you want a medal? Stop being a whiny bitch and expecting everyone else to have the same opinion. Take 3 seconds to look at someone's feedback and figure, is this a piece of shit? Or are they offering valid points that shows that they did genuinely watch the movie and did genuinely have issues with it? That don't just revolve around race, or sexuality or any of that stuff. Because people that judge it on that, fair enough, fuck them. Now, this has been a weird conclusion because I didn't really have a place for a whole lot of that, but I felt that it needed to be said because I've seen it ramping up just like it did for Black Panther and just like it did for Captain Marvel. I also feel comfortable enough saying this because I feel like I have a relatively decent, level-headed viewer base and that most of you aren't fucking weirdos. But this is the channel now spouting those hot takes so you don't have to. Eternals is a frustrating one. You know, I went wanting to like this one. I wanted to give it that chance and it just didn't do it for me. I actually got kind of annoyed at the fact that someone tried to put it down to the fact that there just wasn't enough action in the film for me, because admittedly I shouldn't have cared as much, but I would watch 3 hours of an MCU film of just people talking. That is not my issue with this film. It goes far deeper than that. It's a tonal issue, it's character issues. There's so much going on with this film that I don't like, and it's not just down to like there's not enough fucking ugly CGI action sequences, because I could do without them. Again, this is literally just my opinion. If you disagree, cool. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear about this movie from a different perspective. If you follow me on Twitter, DM me links to video essays that are maybe saying things that contradict what I say. Let me know the good side of this movie so that I can perhaps look on it as a better one. I don't understand this mentality where people think that I and other content creators get off on disliking movies. Like, I don't want to fucking hate Eternals. I don't want to dislike Eternals. I love movies. It doesn't give me any satisfaction to have to make a video like this from a point of view of disappointment. Real quick too, if you haven't seen the film and you're watching videos like this to decide whether you should, stop it. My opinion isn't remotely influential. I don't want my opinion to be influential, and if I find out that I am somehow influencing people to not go see movies just because I didn't like them, I consider myself to be failing. Go and see Eternals. Don't wait for your favourite content creator to give you a reason not to. Just go and watch it. Make up your own mind on it before you can be swayed by someone else's. For me, Eternals isn't a great movie, but don't take my fucking word for it. Be your own critic. And fuck Rotten Tomatoes.